I want you to think about what decade you were a teenager in for a moment. This young lady is going to ask a question about this, and we're going to come back and we're going to answer it.
Hey, quick question. What decade were you a teenager in, and what decade do you wish you would have been a teenager in? I'll go first. I was a teenager in the early 2000s, and I wish I would have been a teenager in the 80s because I think I would have done really well with my big curly hair and love of crazy colors.
Okay, so you heard the question. What decade were you a teenager in, and what decade do you wish you were a teenager in? And I know that there are a lot of people out there who feel like they were born in the wrong time, feel like they grew up in the wrong time. There are people that are referred to as old souls, that they should have been born a long time before they actually were born. I was a teenager in the 80s. I became a teenager in 1985. That's when I turned 13. I was born in 72. So, yeah, I came of age. I became a teenager and spent a good chunk of my teen years in the 80s. 85 through 90 were some of the more pivotal times in my life. And I got to tell you something. I don't wish I was a teenager in any other year or any other era, I guess, any other decade. Like some people from the 80s, I remember them thinking, I wish I grew up in the 70s or the 60s. Man, that would have been cool. Nah. I grew up at the right time, in my opinion. I grew up in a period of time in the 1980s where the old world, the world of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s was beginning to meet the new world of the 90s and 2000s. That I think the 80s was sort of that the beginning of that, bridging that gap, like in technology and things of that nature. But it wasn't so advanced yet that our lives were exposed, so to speak, like the kids nowadays, where everything's online and everything's electronic. We began to see technological advances, but we didn't live them every day necessarily. You know, like our big technological advance was MTV in the 80s, right? Wow, they're playing music on television. Holy shit. But I still, quite literally, in 86, 87, quite literally would roll a pack of Winstons up in my sleeve and walk the train tracks into town. No phone, no pager, none of that shit. Would spend Friday and Saturday night hanging out on the main strip in Linton, Indiana, as the cars drove by with their music blasted, and people would stop at the various parking lots and talk and hang out and see what's going on and who's doing what and who wants to match one. Well, you know, we'll go for a cruise and we'll burn one, you know, shit like that. I was born in the exact right time. I think I got the right amount of technology in my youth. I think I got the right amount of world strife. Yeah, I didn't have to deal with half the shit my kids have had to deal with in their lifetime. And in my opinion, probably the best decade ever for music. You had your old school classic rock, you had your oldies, you had these new forms of music coming on like rap and metal and hair bands. And we had really phenomenal advancement in progressive music. And you still had your popular music that was dominated by some of the biggest voices ever, and like Madonna and Michael Jackson and shit like that. It was fucking. I was a teenager in the 80s, and I wouldn't have wanted to be a teenager in any other decade but the 80s.